Great.
We are just letting some more folks join and then we will get started. So give us a few more minutes. Thank you for joining us. Let's give it 2 more minutes and then we'll get started here in a second.
Sounds great.
Hi.
Good to have you here.
Yeah, good to have you here. Great to see you guys. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We have a good crowd today and this is going to be great. So why don't we first get started and introduce ourselves. My name is Rachetta. I am the editor at the Pulse. I am a Houston native. I went to the University of Houston and I studied journalism and business was my minor. I have experience in newspaper and broadcast reporting. In fact, my first internship in college, I was working at the local NPR affiliate in Houston and I was producing sound beds and audio files for the hosts and reporters to use on air. I come from a very, very large family with lots of brothers and sisters. My parents are both immigrants. And when I was really young, I told myself that I was going to work as a journalist for my hometown paper, which was and is still the Houston Chronicle. And I got that opportunity twice when I interned at the Houston Chronicle newspaper. And that for me was a dream come true. I was still in college and that's when I began my professional career in journalism. And right after graduating, I took another paid internship in Las Vegas for the Las Vegas Review-Journal. And that was a life-changing moment. I was able to produce amazing stories. In fact, I did a series on a water park. It was an investigative series and, you know, we were able to explore the safety infractions that water park was doing. In fact, one person, a child, he drowned, and we realized that person, that company that was running the water park did not have enough. They didn't have enough lifeguards, and so it led to an entire ordeal. But after Las Vegas, I moved to Hawaii, specifically to Kauai, and you know, I went from the desert to the ocean and it was just beautiful. And I worked on the island of Kauai in Lihue. And from Kauai, I came back to the mainland and I went to Washington State. So from the ocean to an Iceland. And I worked at the Yakima Herald Republic, and it was just, you know, it was a completely different experience coming from, you know, Texas to Vegas to Hawaii and then to Washington State, where I'd never experienced the kind of snow and blizzards that I did. So that was very interesting, reporting in snow. And then I came full circle. I came back to Texas, kind of like a homecoming, and I landed at a reporting job at the Houston Chronicle. And that again was just amazing, working for my hometown paper. And that's the last place I was before I moved to California. So I want to talk a little bit about the stories. You already heard about the series on the water park, but in the 9 years of journalism, I mean, I've covered a variety of topics. I've, done anything from lifestyle and community news. I've done the police beat and court reporting. And, like I've mentioned, I've done hard-hitting investigative news pieces related to mental health, disability rights, and domestic violence. I've covered my fair share of city council meetings and school board meetings. A lot of those are very entertaining, very great. And I also think that these meetings are incredibly important to the health of the community, right? And whether that be to increase civic engagement or to help residents petition their government, I think these meetings are places where, other people, they're making the decisions for us, and these are ultimately going to be decisions that are going to affect our lives. So that's why, as a media site, as a news site, the Pulse, we plan to be at these meetings. We want to cover the important issues so that we can bring that information to you guys. And we hope that you'll stay with us so that you can, read all about that and kind of get a little more idea about what you, is there a child behind me? No, there is not a child behind me, Joanne. At least I don't think so. Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Leah. And Leah, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and your history?
Yeah, well, Michelle did a beautiful job introducing herself and also the Pulse and what we're here for. So I'll just give you a quick intro to who I am. I am a native of Menlo Park, just alongside Redwood City. I grew up going to the movie theater and downtown and Candy Cane Lane, which I just returned to this last Sunday, which was awesome. I didn't know I wanted to be a journalist growing up. I thought maybe I wanted to be a veterinarian or some sort of biologist. And I went to the East Coast and studied biology. And then I spent a year abroad doing research on baboons in Kenya. And I came back and decided I wanted to be a writer. And so I found my way into a literary magazine and then in San Francisco. And then for the last 3 or so years, I've been working in Berkeley for UC Berkeley's alumni publication as an editor and writer. And I helped launch our podcast as well. And yeah, I found that I'm a very curious person, a very distractible person, and I have very wide-ranging interests. And that is what has really been captivating about journalism, is the opportunity to talk to many different kinds of people and explore many different topics and ideas and issues and constantly jump from one thing to another. And I'm really excited to be here and to be back sort of in my hometown, at least in my home county, getting to know a new community, practicing my Spanish, and taking on a newsier beat, something a little different from magazine writing, a little bit faster turnaround, trying to really engage with the community and build connections. And I'm learning a ton, and I do have a special place in my heart for science journalism. So one of my favorite stories that I was able to write so far this year was about the termite swarms that emerged after the rains. That kind of stuff is totally my jam. I love to see, how we are engaging with our environment and how it's affecting us, our sort of urban and built environment and natural environment. And yeah, I think that's probably enough for now. I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. So now that we've introduced ourselves, I do want to introduce the Pulse, or at least give you guys a little more information about who we are as a media site. And let me go ahead and read our mission statement. Our mission statement is short. It's to provide accurate, thought-provoking journalism that inspires the public to make the best possible decisions about their communities. And that's what our mission is as well, as a media company. I would say that some of the goals that we hope that we accomplish is that we remain fair, balanced, accurate, trustworthy, insightful, ethical, and of course, we want to keep it local. And I want to go ahead and just, give you guys a little more information about us. We've gotten a lot of questions about who we are, who funds us, all those kinds of questions. Well, I will say that the Redwood City Pulse has been years in the making, right? This idea began before I was even here. We are owned by an independent media company called Embarcadero Media. And if you've ever read the Palo Alto Weekly or the Palo Alto Online, the Almanac, the Mountain View Voice, then you're very familiar with what we're trying to accomplish here in Redwood City. Embarcadero Media, they have 40 years of providing news coverage in the Bay Area. So they are very established here. And they have made a name for themselves. We are a part of them. So you can expect more of that and more of, more stuff, right, from us. I believe that every city needs a dedicated news media that focuses on the concerns and issues that promote civic engagement. And that's why I believe that Redwood City needs its own. And that's why we're here. I mean, I learned that Redwood City had, various little media companies, and I wanted to bring something. I thought that this was a very, very ambitious goal, but we are here now, and that's our goal. So, Leah, do you want to tell us a little bit about the topics that we want to cover?
Everything. You should see my list. But really, I mean, in a given day, I am talking to you, talking to experts, talking to officials, community members about everything from the meals that students are eating in school to the termites that are emerging from their nests. That's probably not the right term, to the city council meeting that happened last night, the gun buyback program that's happening, that happened last weekend, what the school board is going to talk about, tomorrow night. Really, we're trying to cover the gambit and trying to find out what's most important to you and to the community. And some of the things that I've found that have been really important so far that keep coming up are new developments, whether that's housing or retail or, a lot of new developments happening in downtown Redwood City. And I know that affects, transportation and circulation and people's just experience of being in Redwood City. I know housing itself is a big issue. Education, wanting equity among schools and equal access to resources. Transportation itself, there's a lot of developments happening at the Sequoia Station and with Caltrain. Climate change is another big one that, of course, has its fingers in everything, whether it's building new houses or transportation or, just how we're going to deal with the trees and try to manage flooding as storms increase in severity, and weather. There's weather, everything.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many things that we want to touch on. I mean, I feel like we have gotten emails and feedback from so many people who have sent us story tips and ideas and their thoughts on, what they feel affects the community. And I think that those things are very important. And I just want to remind you guys that this is also a Q&A. So if you guys have any questions or you feel that, we haven't covered a topic or that's something you want to know about us, please feel free to use the Q&A section. I will do my best to answer your questions. And you can also use the chat box. We're monitoring all of this stuff. So please let us know what your questions are. In the meantime, we will continue talking. We will continue telling you guys a little bit about ourselves. Mm-hmm. I want to ask Leah, because we are colleagues, but because of the pandemic, we don't really get to spend a lot of time together. And, we don't that I think that's important. But I want to get to know Leah a little better. So I'm going to ask Leah, what motivates you as a journalist, Leah?
That's a great question. I think that, I think that ultimately it's curiosity. I think curiosity is the number one thing that drives me. Just the unanswered questions, and the fact that every answered question leads to more questions. I think it's curiosity about the way that the world works. I've learned a ton in a couple of months here about things that I hardly knew existed, like how to access meeting minutes from city council meetings and agendas and staff reports. And there is an incredible wealth of information about what is happening in our community on a governmental level, on a policy level, on an environmental level that I didn't even know to look for before. And so the more I learn, the more I realize there is to learn and to find. And then I think curiosity about people. I'm so interested in, every person I pass on the street has their own story, is kind of the protagonist in their own life, and has a full and complete experience, with similar and different issues and concerns. And, they're going somewhere and coming from somewhere, and they need to get there in a certain way, and they need to be able to get food on their table later that night, and everyone's accessing these resources, experiencing this world in a completely unique way. And I think that if it's possible to capture some of that, and both our different and shared experiences through stories, through journalism, to make people feel seen and heard and connected to their community, I think is an incredible thing. And it's just such a wealth. I mean, the more I learn, the richer the community gets. And just the ability to be surprised every day, to learn something new, to realize that there is something unknown about the experiences that people in our community have. Though there's a gem of a restaurant that I've never heard of. There's, I heard a great story from our library director yesterday about how he acquired some of his Christmas decorations that he puts up on his house on Candy Cane Lane. And it's just like, there's those moments of, oh my God, what an incredible story. I want to share that with the community, and I want to know what stories you have to share too. What about you?
Well, I have always had an interest in seeking the truth and learning, about people, right? I grew up in a family that didn't really have the opportunities to seek higher education. And so we were really, I don't know what the best way to say, I would say we were really stuck on our views, just kind of, in one place. So we didn't really have those opportunities to seek knowledge and to grow. And I think that, my parents were immigrants, right? So college wasn't something that was going to be in my future. It wasn't something that, I was going to, I was going to work. I was going to, do all of those things instead and help out in the family. And so as a teenager, and then later on in life, I did a lot of, exploring and learning and investigating and growing. And I think that was, kind of like the catalyst, realizing that I didn't want just this type of, just this very small learning. And I decided that seeking the truth was more important to me. And so that's kind of what led me to journalism. And, since starting this path, I can tell you that I've met some of the most amazing people, and I've explored different people's ideas and opinions. I feel like I've really grown as a person. And I think that's really important as a journalist, right? the storytelling, the meeting the people, learning new things, and that helps me. It helps me, and it helps the people that I'm sharing these stories with, right? Because it opens up different ideas that maybe I didn't know before, things that I've learned. So that's kind of what inspires what inspires me as a journalist to kind of go forward and tell different types of stories. So all right, I'm going to ask you another question. Well, actually, we have a couple of questions.
Have a couple, yeah.
Yeah, we have a couple questions, and let's go ahead and see. Yeah. So first of all, I'm going to answer Emily's question. Her question is, hi, I'm a journalist. And she is in City College in San Francisco, and she's wondering whether the Pulse has freelance reporters or internships. Well, I can tell you right now that yes, we do. We actually do offer freelance opportunities. I would ask that if you are interested in freelancing, this goes to anybody who's in the audience who may be interested in freelancing for us, to send us an email. And could one of the moderators put in our editor at the rwcpulse.com email in there, just our contact information, so that everyone can see that and send us their questions as well, or their feedback. That's definitely something that's very important to us. And I want to ask Leah, I know you kind of already touched a lot on this, but is there something that you are excited about, in exploring in Redwood City, some story that you are just super interested in doing?
Yeah, I mean, you've heard me talk about this a lot over the last few weeks, but I've been looking into the meals that are provided at schools in Redwood City School District, and hearing from parents who would like healthier options for their kids, and from other people involved in the community, teachers, students, etc. And what I think is so interesting about this story and this issue, one, I think food is fascinating. We all have a very different relationship with food and need it, right? Like, it's something we experience at least 3 times a day, hopefully. And it has such an impact on the way that we live. And talking with teachers, the difference between a kid who's eaten a healthy, nutritious meal and one who hasn't, it's a huge difference in their ability to engage in school and be present and be positive and engage. It touches on so many different issues in terms of not just nutrition and health and student engagement, but also questions of equity, and also just how systems are built, and looking at the ways that things have been changing over time, particularly over the course of the pandemic, with limited resources and issues in supply chains. And this just is like a huge sprawling thing, but what it comes down to is, what are we eating for lunch? And it matters a lot. And so I'm been learning a ton about the schools and the students, and dietary preferences, cultural preferences, the systems that are in place, that budgetary concerns, all of this, that I'm really excited and interested about. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna pick up another question from the audience. And Tim Clark asks whether or not our more informal and chatty writing in the Pulse is intentional, or is it a conscious choice? Yes, I would think so, because it does fit better with our natural personality, personally, for me. I don't want to come off giving I think this is important. I don't want to come off giving a stuffy, you know, just super business-like type of, because that's just not who I am, right? I'm not that kind of person. I think it's important that we do provide accurate information. I think it's important that we are conscious of the type of information we're putting out there, that we're very, you know, that we're putting unbiased, balanced ideas out there, right? But that doesn't mean that we have to present ourselves in this very just straight, you know, formal always way. Do we want to cover all the topics? Do we want to touch on all the stuff? Absolutely. Do we want to provide the best coverage out there? Do we want to be the choice for you to come and find and, you know, gather and get your news and all of that stuff? Yes. But I think there are different ways to do that. I think that we can provide that coverage, you know, via different types of multimedia. I think what we're trying to do is a little bit different in that we are finding new and exciting ways to tell stories, right? So whether that be through an Instagram reel, whether that be through a TikTok, you know, a Facebook post that kind of explains who we are. I think those types of things, people are more, you know, visual. And I think that it's, you know, I think that that's important, to find every single way to tell a story. Some people just would prefer maybe listening to something, you know, watching something that is just easily digestible. And yeah, I think that's important. Leah, do you have anything to add to that?
I was just going to say that one of the things that really excited me when I was interviewing for this position was that you and our president, Bill, said, you don't need to, we're creating something new. You sort of said that, and you don't need to be beholden to the precedent of other institutions, other publications. We can invent our own way of giving news that best suits the needs of the community. And so I think in trying out a different tone, I think that's part of our general attempt to try out different ways of engaging with people and sharing stories and just figuring out what suits us and what suits you, what suits our community. How do people like to get their information, you know, and we're not attached to it looking a certain way or being a certain way, and we're certainly not settled yet. You know, it's only been a couple of months. So if you all have thoughts or ideas or feedback about things that have worked for you, haven't, that you would like to see, yeah, we're all ears. We're still growing and iterating and evolving. That too. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
To that, I saw that Joanne posted in the chat. She was saying that she thinks that the Palo Alto Post and the Daily Journal are doing enough coverage of Redwood City. So I'd be curious to hear, kind of jumping off from what we were just saying, what is it that you feel like we're able to add to that or contribute? How are we necessary or important to the community, given that there are some publications doing some coverage already?
Yeah, we didn't come in with this idea that we were going to replace anybody, right? We didn't come in with this idea that we were going to, you know, do something better. That we wanted to provide another source of information. We wanted to provide a different source of information, and kind of like what Leah, you know, just said about the different ways that we are doing that, right? We are engaging our audience in a variety of media. And I think that, you know, I don't want to say, you know, hey, you know, Daily Post or hey, Climate Magazine, you know, we're going to do it better. And a lot of, and you know, as a journalist, I have in the past collaborated with different news sites, different media, different people, right? Because that's ultimately, we all have the same goal. We're trying to put out accurate information. And sometimes that requires us to collaborate with these other folks. And so I don't want to come off. I mean, I've met the people over at Climate. I've met them at events, and we've spoken. We're very friendly. Do we necessarily want to cover the same topics that they do? I mean, not necessarily. We've said a lot during this. We have so many other topics that we want to touch on, to brush onto, to explore. And maybe those aren't going to be the same as Climate, as, even our own sister papers, Almanac, they may put out something that, really affects, that they believe is going to affect their community. And even though the communities are very close, that may not be something that we will pick up. And so I just wanted to point that out, that we are trying different things. We've been a media site for 2 months. So this is a matter of what works, what doesn't, and a lot of that is going to depend on our readers. Okay, so what we're asking you is, if you see something, if you like something, if you hate something, we're open to suggestions. We're open to you coming to us and saying, hey, you did a story, you didn't finish, you missed this, that. Okay, great. We'll work on that. If you have a story tip, I mean, like I said before, we get so many story tips, we get so many great ideas, and that leads us to public records requests. That leads us to going in and kind of exploring that topic a little more, a little more closely. And so again, we're not here to replace your everyday, other sources of information. No, that's not who we are. I don't believe in that. I think the more information, the better. I think if you can find a news source that you like, and then maybe go to one you don't like, and then, decide, because ultimately you need to, I think it's important to get as much information as possible, right? If something doesn't fit into your worldview, maybe question that. Why doesn't it fit? So open up open up your ideas, open up all of that, and explore that. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to open a conversation, to talk to the community, to present, information, and give you guys another source to go to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we have another question. And this question asks, news organizations often focus on people of power, which is necessary for accountability. So how do we plan to listen to minority residents, those who are poor and also need their issues covered? How do you plan to listen to them and get that information? Well, I think that's incredibly important, right? Mm-hmm. I come from a family that, again, as I mentioned before, we didn't have a lot of opportunities. So I'm very familiar with that. I'm very familiar with, that community. I'm a minority myself. And so we have been in contact with a lot of nonprofits and organizations and people who may, that are helping the community, those parts of the community. A lot of times those folks get ignored. We can all say that. And so we are touching on that. We are working with them. In fact, we have written stories in Spanish. We have, we eventually plan on putting out a newsletter in Spanish. I'm fluent, Leah's fluent. We do have conversations with people who only speak Spanish to add to our stories. And we are covering issues that matter to that community as well. And I think, Leah has worked on stories about the homeless population. We speak to these people where they are. We don't want to just get information from the county and, you know, whatever they say is true. No, we're going to the source to talk to these people to really get an idea of what they're going to. Again, nonprofits are very helpful. These people are also helping a lot of people who often are not the focus. Leah, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a good question. I think that it is so easy to only report on the people who are the loudest, which often are the people who are, even if they're not in the majority population, you know, tend to be not minorities, whether they're whiter or wealthier or just in power in some form, and feel powerful in speaking up. And I think that what it requires is digging beyond the obvious stories and digging beyond you know, the maybe easiest stories or the most obvious, or looking for intention, making a choice to look for a voice that isn't currently being represented. And that takes an extra effort. I mean, I'm thinking about, I've been working on a story about housing, and of course the eviction moratorium ended in September, and a huge part of Redwood City's community is housing insecure. And we maybe know it, but we aren't necessarily hearing from those people. But when you look at the statistics, it's really significant. And so how do we reach these people? Well, it's such a good question, but it has to happen. And I think in at least in this case, for me, a big part of it is connecting with the community leaders, the people who are representing underrepresented voices, but are easier to access, maybe like the director of, Casa Círculo Cultural, who is a voice for a lot of people in the community, a gathering place, and building trust, building relationships, and then through these relationships, reaching out to other people, making connections with other people. It's not something I've always kind of held as a principle for me as a journalist, is that no one is required to speak to me. I should give them a good reason to talk to me. And it's not just because I want to take their story and use it because it's going to get a lot of page views. It's because I have a proven and legitimate interest in what they're experiencing and in their life and needs and issues, and for their benefit, for the benefit of the entire community, I want to help them tell their story. And I think it takes work and dedicated effort, and not just being okay with the easiest version or the quickest version, but really intentionally seeking out people who make up a significant part of our community, but are not always heard.
Lovely. Okay. There's a question from Billy James. Who are the journalists, past and present, you admire? Well, let me go ahead and start and say some of the people that I admire, some of the journalists are people that I have worked with. Why? Because they're tireless. They go in, they get the story, they tell the story, they provide everything. Now, one of the people I can tell you right off the bat is, her name is Lisa Olsen. She's an investigative reporter. She's currently right now with the Texas Tribune, but she worked at the Houston Chronicle while I was there. And when I was, I would say in college, I thought she was amazing. I still think that. She recently wrote a book, and I mean, every time I see her, I'm just like, oh my God, Aziz Olsen, you know? But a lot of times, or rather my colleagues, the people that I've worked with in the past, I mean, I can just see their dedication, right? And I want to be them. Another reporter that I admire, her name is Carrie Blakinger. She was actually in prison at one point, and she had a really tough time in prison, and she was in prison for heroin use, all this stuff. But she got a chance. Somebody took a chance on her, and they gave her a job as a reporter. And now she's probably the top prison reporter. I mean, she reports on jails, she reports on inmates. She gets really good scoops from inside the jail, from different jails. I mean, she's helped people get medical treatment in the jails. She's uncovered all kinds of things. These are people that are really, really dedicated and working very hard. And these are the people that I admire as a journalist. And some of the things that they've covered, like, sexual abuse and sexual assault in the court system that got covered up for years, and uncovering that, and just really showing people and holding folks accountable, even people who seem untouchable. That's the kind of journalism that really inspires me, knowing these folks. Aaliyah.
Gosh, it's a really good question. I really admire Elizabeth Colbert or Colbert. I'm not entirely sure how her last name is pronounced. She's a writer for The New Yorker. She generally covers science, and I think she's just like an incredibly ambitious journalist, like takes on huge topics. She wrote a really amazing book called The Sixth Mass Extinction, about how we're in a new era of species extinction that is human driven, and her ability to synthesize really big topics and bring them home and make them relevant to someone sitting in their apartment in a city is, I think, really, really admirable. She's just like quite prolific and a beautiful writer. I also really admire the producer host of Radio Ambulante. It's a Spanish, it's sort of like, they kind of call themselves like the Spanish speaking This American Life. They cover, the host producer is Daniel Alarcon, and he kind of started this thing. He was like, why is there not a story about the lives of Latinx people and Central South American Mexican people in Spanish? Why does this not exist? And so he was like, let me start it and see what happens. And it has totally gathered a following, not just of Spanish speakers, but also people like myself who are not native speakers and want to hear these stories and also want to practice listening and improving comprehension. And I think what he took on was very ambitious, and he really like saw a need in the community, saw a hole, and saw an opportunity to share stories that were not being told.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking at the time here, and it looks like we are a little bit past the time. I still want to encourage you guys, if you have other questions, I mean, even if you don't ask them here, you can definitely email us those questions. I just want to thank everybody who joined us. This was something that I have been wanting to do since we started, and we finally got an opportunity to do it. So I want to thank you guys all for coming on, and for asking your questions, for being here. And again, I encourage everyone to reach out, send your feedback, send your thoughts, your gripes, send us story tips. Yes, leak us information. But anyways, thank you guys. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna go ahead and close out the session unless anybody has other items. Seeing none, I will say goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you all. It was so good to have you here. And yes, please, we want to hear from you.
Bye, everyone.